All right, we are on air. Happy Thursday, everybody. It is July 26th. This meeting is a check-in for active tasks for community outreach to help spread the word about Backdrop. First and foremost, our website. We have an issue number 442 in the queue for improving the experience of selecting modules, themes, and layouts. That hasn't gotten any attention lately, but it is kind of on our priority list to work on. So if anyone has any time or energy and wants to help with that, I think that would be great, not only for helping people who are building current sites, but for helping people who are thinking about using Backdrop have a better tool for deciding when Backdrop is ready for their site. Like, are all the modules I need available? Is there a theme that I can use? Those questions need to be answered before people can choose to adopt, and so we need to make it easier for people to get those answers. There's also been some talk about adding a security page. I think we have,
we have done that already, haven't we?
I'm like, oh yeah, I made one. Okay. And then I think maybe you could use a review. Backdrop, cms.org/security is a rework of our current security page. So maybe you should take a look at this too and make sure that it's working. But we essentially took the security slide from our talk that we added in the last 6 months or so and put all of the information here on this page, including a little bit about how to get on the security email list. And we moved the list of advisories into the right sidebar so that there's more information about security on the security page. This page has also been added into the main navigation. It used to only be linked in the footer, but now it's under the About section since it now contains about information about security. Information about security. About information. Yeah. So Nate, if you think we need to keep both pages, like an informational page as well as a page that just lists the security advisories, I'm open to doing that too. But it seemed to me that they might fit together, so I did it this way.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think we should restructure the copy a little bit, probably. Like, it's a little bit strange how we start with, like, we're on the Drupal security team. Like, that's a very strange introduction to, how we operate as a security, our security processes.
Okay. I only did that because that's the order it was in our talk, but I totally agree that when we're talking about ourselves, maybe we should start with our process and then say, by the way, we also collaborate with Drupal.
Yeah,
right.
Feels backwards now.
Yeah, good point. Okay.
Yeah, actually, if we just switch these, just saying, about the Backdrop security team, and then also we're on the Drupal security team too, like then it would be much better.
That would be just fine. Okay, that's a quick change to make. Thanks for the recommendation there. So, yay, we have a security page. Other stuff going on our website. It's always nice to have blog posts. I think. Let's see. We have some spam blog posts that are not published. I want to see if anyone else put in anything recently. Nothing legitimate. We have also, just so everybody knows, we cranked up our spam protection on both the forum site and backdropcms.org because we started getting more robots that were smart enough to bypass the reCAPTCHA that was on there. So now anti-bot module is on here as well. And that's available in Kinship if anyone else wants to try that solution too. But in our blog, we have a list of things we'd like to write blog posts about. A general blog post about Backdrop joining the Software Freedom Conservancy is in the works. We have a draft of it. That's blocked right now on us figuring out some of the financial considerations about how to accept donations from people in all of the various ways that we currently accept donations. So via PayPal, we have a form where you can request a t-shirt or a hoodie. We haven't gotten an equivalent one of those for the Conservancy yet, although we're working on it. And then also when we show up at events, we often will bring t-shirts and hoodies and distribute them at the event in exchange for a transaction done through Square. And we're still using our own Square account. We haven't gotten added to the Backdrop or the Conservancy Square account yet. And so right now we have not officially transferred our finances over to them. So we're working with their onboarding team to figure out what are the last steps in getting that done. And as soon as we get that done, our blog post and newsletter will go out with a call for donations to people, and the new donations will be tax deductible. As long as we're doing the donations, they're not tax deductible because we have to pay taxes on them. So we don't want to put out a request for donations until we can actually honor tax deductible donations, however people want to give them to us. So those are underway. Nate also wanted to write a more specific blog post about Conservancy and PMC. He's really busy these days, but our content team has offered to write some of these blog posts for us. If we can put down sort of a bolded list of ideas, they'll offer to flesh them out using sort of tone and pattern of our previous announcement blog posts. So Nate, if you have time to write a bulleted list, they will take it from there. They have also offered to take over our community spotlight posts. So I pointed them at the current issue in the GitHub queue with the questions about things we can ask community spotlight members. And that way, if Tom's not around or available to write a blog post, we can still get a community spotlight out whenever we don't have any other information to share, which I thought would be really useful. And they're also going to make some recommendations about other questions we might want to ask members in the community that might be valuable to others in the community. So that should be coming soon as well. There are a lot of cool things that Backdrop can integrate with, including the fact that it works built into DDEV and Lando, which are local development environments, the fact that it runs on Pantheon, the fact that it can work with services like Stripe using the Stripe module, etc. I thought it might be interesting to do a blog post or maybe a series of blog posts on each of these products. And one of the things that I thought might be good to highlight would be Fastly, which is a content delivery network, because Fastly is offered to provide free service to Backdrop under their open source agenda. They sort of want to support nonprofits and open source organizations. So I thought that might also be a nice little co-branding exercise where we could do something on our site saying thank you, Fastly, for your support, and then they would put us into one of their announcements on their site and say this is one of the open source software projects we're supporting. But that would mean that we would need to invest some time into putting our properties on Fastly because we want it to be on Fastly before we make the announcement that they've offered to provide that service. And then also I thought it would be nice if we ported the Fastly module. I don't know, I think their team would probably want to maintain it long term, but we could collaborate with them on either their initial port or documentation or whatever it is they need so that we could reference that in the article too. So that's something that I think is all a good idea, but of course will take some time and effort. So if we had someone who had a Backdrop site that wanted to use Fastly, it might be nice to kind of roll that into the same thing. My client that I thought I was going to be able to do that for decided to go with Cloudflare. Wah, wah. So I was hoping to get that paid for, but it turned out not to go the way I was hoping for. So now I have to do it in my spare time, which is fine, but I don't have very much of that right now. So we'll get there eventually. Other things we're going to announce in our blog post, obviously new releases of Backdrop. Backdrop 1.11 will be coming out next month, 2 months almost. Code freezes soon, a month and a bit. But there, of course, are any number of things that we could post on the blog, things that we think people might find interesting. We're open to feedback from the general community. We're open to the community writing blog posts if anyone's doing anything really cool with Backdrop and you want to share. If you have a backdropcms.org account, you can draft a blog post. And if there's a blog post in an unpublished state, we will review, offer feedback if you want it, and put you into a publishing schedule, which is usually, we don't want more than one blog post per week, but there's not always a blog post every week. So it'll be like sometime a week or so after you wrote the post, it will go up, usually. All right, other ways we tell people about Backdrop. We have a newsletter. We haven't sent a newsletter for a while because we like to coordinate the newsletter with a blog post so we can drive traffic to the blog. We have to tell them something valuable. So we have a draft for Conservancy news post, and newsletter that pair together that are both sort of on hold. But if anyone has anything else we think the community needs to be notified about sooner than that post, we can write another blog post or send another newsletter. So open to ideas there. Our content strategy team is also coming up with other things we should maybe be putting into the newsletter to help us out with that. Ideas we had were to write a news post highlighting Backdrop's security process, so pointing to our new security page, maybe also highlighting, Gregory, your blog post on security that went out earlier this year, and talking, just a little bit about Backdrop security process, maybe specifically relating to one of the releases that went out earlier this year, just so people understand what's going on behind the scenes and all of that. And I thought that might be a nice tie-in to get the page, the blog post, and then send a newsletter about it. But we would need somebody to draft that newsletter. So if anyone has any free time and wants to write some copy for us, that would be a good use of time. I think we already have some good content that would be a good starting point for that, and it would be fairly easy to tie it together. Similarly, we could write a newsletter that talks about our integrations. If we had a blog post or a series of blog posts about those, we could point back to them. We will have a newsletter that comes out for the Backdrop 111 release. I would love to get one out before that, though. So also, if we got, community spotlight up before then, we could use the newsletter to highlight people in the community if we wanted to as well. Videos. We mentioned it would be great to get more videos about Backdrop out there. I did a couple of talks, we'll talk about this under events in a little bit, at DrupalCamp LA last weekend, and there were a couple of things that people were really fascinated with in the Backdrop user interface, which I thought might make good video snippets, and I will try and itemize those and put them into the ticket. Our ticket for video post is number 130. So if anyone has any time and wants to do quick screen share videos of Backdrop, those would be good things to grab. Other things that are already good ideas, Backdrop unbranded pages, something that's really hard to do in Drupal currently. Could be something that would be a quick demo. How to update a Pantheon site. So if you have a Pantheon site that's running an older version of Backdrop, there's 2 steps that don't match what you do on Drupal. So just a quick demo to show those off would be good too. And how to port tests is something that I was asked about in the Drupal queue once, and I thought would be great. I worked on a module recently, I think it might have been Antibot. There was one that had a very minimal number of tests, and I saw it and was like, oh, this would be perfect for a video, but then I was in a hurry and so I didn't do it. So if anyone else has a module they're working on that has tests that you think would be great as an example for how to port tests from a Drupal module to a Backdrop module, record it, because people are curious about that. Our test system is a little bit different. It's not very hard to get it converted over, but I think seeing it done once is going to help people do it themselves. Tweets. I've been trying to schedule tweets for Backdrop. So after our meetings on Thursdays, I try and post stuff that's timely and relevant that our community needs to know about. It looks like this week, Lando has a video about how to do Backdrop on Lando, which is great. We'll tweet about that. There's also an issue for general things, issue number 439, general things we should be tweeting about Backdrop. If anyone has any ideas about anything that is timely and relevant that you would like to see on Twitter, definitely go ahead and add something to that issue, or you can tweet at us. That would probably be a good way to get that stuff tweeted back to. So that issue is number 439 in the backdropcms.org queue. Backdrop mentions. So it's great that we tweet about Backdrop and put Backdrop stuff on our own website and put Backdrop stuff in our newsletter, but those kinds of things already go out to people who know about Backdrop already. So trying to get Backdrop mentioned in places that aren't already captured, that haven't already captured our audience, I think is more valuable. And so we're definitely open to ideas about different ways we can do stuff like that. The issue there is number 126, if you have any ideas about where that should be. There are a couple of good recommendations in there, but I don't think there's been forward progress on actively trying to seek out more, actively trying to cross-post blogs in other places. So if anybody wanted to take that on, that's also a great task for somebody to help us with Word. We tend to be busy, and as developers don't think about writing words or where to put them. So we definitely could use help in that area. Events. All right, so last weekend, Drupal Camp LA happened. It was at UC Irvine in Southern California. It was very hot, but there was still a pretty good turnout. I did 2 sessions on Backdrop, and this was the first time that we took what was normally our 1-hour session, which had sort of half of it was spent on why we forked Drupal, and then the second half was a live demo. And we split it into 2 separate sessions. So this is something where Nate and I have been giving that one session for a while, and it started to seem like with all of the new features that were getting added into Backdrop, we kept running out of time. There were things we wanted to talk about during the philosophy section, and we couldn't because we had to cut them because we were running out of time there too. And so we said, hey, why don't we actually split this into 2 sessions, one that's a philosophy and goes through a slide deck, and one that's a hands-on demo, and there's a whole session of a hands-on demo. And I did those 2 sessions separately for the first time at Drupal Camp LA, and it was great because a lot of people who were in the philosophy talk, which I did first, then also came to the demo talk, which they weren't planning on doing until after they saw the philosophy talk in some cases. So that was pretty cool. And the surprising thing was each talk was an entire session in length, just by making myself talk at a reasonable speed, which indicates that Nate and I were running through essentially 2 sessions in 1 hour worth of time for the past, at least the beginning of this year, with all of the latest features since the more recent releases. So that was really interesting to see how much more there is to talk about with Backdrop now than there was when we first started presenting on it. So kudos to everybody for keeping it going and moving forward. The best feedback I got, well, there were 2 amazing pieces of feedback I got. One of them was at the dinner on Saturday night, which was the event's sponsored party. One person sitting across the table from me turned to the person next to them and said, what was the best thing that you saw today? And that person said, probably Backdrop CMS. And so I thought that was a big takeaway. It was fantastic, considering they were there to learn about Drupal. They didn't know about Backdrop. They were curious. They went to see it. They were surprised, and they were really moved by it. So that was great. And then another big takeaway is that for people who hadn't seen Backdrop in a year or 2, were completely floored by how much farther along it is now than it was the last time they took a look at it. So that also says something about, proving why it had to be a fork and not just long-term support for Drupal 7, is that we are able to keep moving it forward and keep making improvements in a way that is really noticeable to people. And that was also, people who might not have been sold on it the first time they saw it, looked at it now and went, oh, wow, okay, I get it. It's, it's continuing. So that was also really good. So in general, the event went really well. The feedback was great. After the sessions, I got a lot of questions from people very specifically about how would I do this in Backdrop? How is this different in Backdrop? And people were seriously looking into it. Where before them, it was just how is it going? Sort of general questions. So yeah, it was a great event. There were a lot of great Drupal sessions. There were also a lot of great non-Drupal, non-Backdrop sessions too. So that was interesting to see people talking about how to write a chat bot and development best practices regardless of which systems you're using. So it was an interesting event all
around. Can I ask something? I noticed that in some events there's a full whole day sort of session. How does that happen? Is it sponsored places which you don't have to pay for, and you sort of hook into Drupal events? How does that happen?
You mean a training class or?
Sort of, yeah, the full day sort of trainings or summits or what do you call them?
Yeah.
Because there is Drupal South, which is a respective sort of Drupal Con for Australia thing.
Yeah.
That is happening usually in big hotels, which I imagine if I wanted to hook up and just extend it sort of it's a 2-day and it usually happens before a weekend. And if I wanted to sort of like have a session, if I'm invited to, and then say after the final day that, you know what, after the Drupal South finishes, then there's an event for Backdrop a whole day. Since you're here, might as well stay. But I feel that this will cost, and I'm curious to find out how you guys do it in the US. Is it like, are there people or organizations that are sponsoring the places that you organize the things to?
Yeah. So the way that it usually works is that a Drupal camp or a tech conference will have an event that already spans a certain number of days. And that event is sort of, they book the rooms, they make sure there's coffee, they check the Wi-Fi. They kind of handle all of the logistics of running an event at any scale. And then for that particular event, it's much easier for them to just add on one day than it would be for a separate organization to book a separate event the day before in the same space. And so for most Drupal events, they say, okay, well, before the camp, we're going to do a day of trainings, and they extend all of their venue rentals and contracts for one day. And then they offer that space to trainers or people running summits or specific focused events. In some cases, so that and how that's paid for varies by the conference. Like every camp or organization team can choose to do it differently. Usually the conference as a whole has sponsors, and so they raise enough money to cover all of their expenses by selling top-tier sponsors, mid-tier sponsors, lower-tier sponsors, however they do it, whatever price point it is, and that money covers the venue rental. In some cases, they will have an event has a specific sponsor. So like if you were running a training, it could be the Backdrop special training, and that would cover the cost of that room for that day, and Backdrop would have to give them money in order to make that sponsorship happen. So it varies by organization, like whether they want money from people who are running the organization or not. In some cases, like if it's a training, the trainers might choose to have people pay additional money for that day, and the money that the students pay might cover the cost of the venue. So it really, I would say if you want to do something for Drupal South, the first thing I would do is reach out to the organizers of that event and say, are you already planning on offering training or whatever? And would Backdrop be allowed to, or summits, would you be open to having Backdrop be one of those events? And if so, like, are there any costs or expectations of the people who are running those events? And see how they feel about that. And if they say yes, then it'll be much easier for you because they're already organizing everything else. They'll tell you what they need from you and what's going to help them and what's not going to help them. If they say no, then it's going to be on the burden for you to find another venue and do all of the organizing and stuff. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you just want to make sure that the lines of communication are open and that you tell them that if it's not going to be part of their event, we would like to do something the next day. Is that okay with you? Just kind of have that conversation just so that there aren't any ruffled feathers. But yeah, I would say doing it afterwards is going to be a lot more work, or doing it not in conjunction with the existing event is going to be a lot more work than if it was part of that same period of time.
Usually it's specific venues and they have certain amount of rooms and they take full advantage of the full number of their rooms. So what worries me is that there will not be a room available for a whole day event. Because if I was to, like, baby steps is, what I'm thinking, first of all, is applying for a session, because it's been 2 years since we last presented in the Drupal South. And if the same people that were there, which it wasn't much of a crowd, it was like 15, 20 people mostly, but if there happened to be for this Drupal South as well, it would be good for them to see how much we've accomplished in the 2 years. But other than that, I'm thinking that this is sort of like a big step to organize something like a full day event along with Drupal South. But perhaps I could hook up with this association, like open source association in Australia, and see if they can hook us up with something. I don't know, at least the venue.
It's a good first step.
Like
if you don't have a whole day available, you could ask for like a half day, and if they don't have
exactly.
you could do like a double session, just feel them out and see what the options are.
Yeah. When I say a whole day, it doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be a whole day. It's just that I don't feel that 1 hour or 40 minutes, which is the normal session, would be enough to explain things to people.
Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of the Backdrop mentions, when it comes to the the section that we already have in b.org. Up to now, I have been, whenever I was coming across blog posts or articles that were mentioning, that were specific for Backdrop, I would put it there. But recently, I also started linking specific blog comments where Backdrop might have been mentioned, and the article actually that Olaf has posted, yeah, but Suzanne might be a candidate as well. I'm not going to add that as well.
Okay.
So it doesn't mention Backdrop extensively. It just mentions it in a paragraph or two, but still, it's a mention. So
yeah, okay, that's great. So while we're on events, right before this meeting started today, Greg and I both struck up a little conversation about running meetups. This is something that we've been asked about in the past about, are we going to do Backdrop meetups? When are we going to do Backdrop meetups? Where are we going to do Backdrop meetups? Questions about how things have done in the Drupal community and how we're going to do them in Backdrop. And so Gregory mentioned that he was interested in starting something up in Australia, in particular the Melbourne area, and wanted to know if there was any other local Backdrop people in the area who would be interested in attending that. So if anyone is watching this meeting now or later, maybe we'll make an announcement in the next meeting too, in case we watch that one instead. Just, voice your interest if you have any. I don't know where. Should we maybe start a forum topic about it too, so people can join in, weigh in there where they want to see from meetups? That'd probably be good. And then I was also mentioning that I thought it would be great to do one here in the Oakland, California, United States area as well. So we'll move that conversation over there and see what kind of interest there is in terms of starting those up. But I think it might be time, we could do them in conjunction with Drupal if people are interested in doing them together. We could also do them separately if there's more demand for that. And then just to wrap up this meeting, if anyone else is interested in the larger plan for content strategy, we have an issue in the queue. It's number 349 in the backdropcms.org queue about the kinds of content that we would like to make available to people and where we would like to put it. If anyone has any other ideas about outreach, we obviously need all the help we can get. So feel free to add comments anywhere in the backdropcms.org queue, tweet at us, post in the forum, just help us out if you think we need it. And then, does anyone on this call have anything else you'd specifically like to include for outreach this week? Okay. Well then, why don't we go ahead and wrap this meeting? We will be checking in 15 minutes to talk about current development tasks for Backdrop CMS.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.